I would like to welcome you once again for the webinar today. My name is Anindita Burakohai, and I am the Outreach Officer for IRCC Delhi. And to take over the presentation today, we have my colleague Shikhir Gupta, who is the Outreach Officer for IRCC Chandigarh. So, Shikhir, I'm handing over the mic to you now for the presentation.
Thanks, Anandita. Can you please confirm if my voice is clear? Anandita, can you please confirm if I'm audible?
Yes, Shikhir, you are audible.
Thanks a lot. So very good morning, everyone. And thank you for tuning into our webinar on study permit processing during COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Shikhir, and I'm the Outreach Officer at the Consulate General of Canada in Chandigarh. The target audience for this webinar are students from India who are interested in pursuing a Canadian post-secondary education. Before we begin, please note that the contents of this webinar are valid only as of today. For the most current information on IRCC processes and travel restrictions to Canada, please visit our website www.canada.ca/immigration. So now let's begin. International students make significant cultural and social contributions to Canada. They also generate more than $21 billion in economic activity. Since the onset of the pandemic, IRCC has implemented a number of temporary policy changes to support and reassure international students and designated learning institutions. The fall 2020 semester has by far the largest international student intake throughout the academic year, and this is fast approaching. The most recently implemented measures were introduced on July 14th and are aimed at this upcoming cohort. The changes will continue Canada's reputation as a premier destination for international students, and they will demonstrate the importance of the International Student Program and the contributions international students make to Canada. We strongly encourage students to still consider studying at Canadian institutions, even if many DLIs have moved their fall 2020 semester to an online format. Moving on our agenda for today, we'll cover the following topics. Number 1 is why you should consider studying in Canada. Number 2 is how the application process works. Number 3 will be restrictions to travel to Canada. Number 4 will be the exemptions to those travel restrictions. Number 5, we'll let you know about the processing changes due to COVID-19, which will include a two-step review process, student direct stream, eligibility to work, authorized leave during studies, and impact on the postgraduate work permit program. Then we'll cover some fraud tips and what you need to know before traveling to Canada. As Anandita said, that we will end the presentation with a question and answer session, and you can use the Q&A box to send us your questions, which we will go through after the presentation. Before we get started on some of the important changes put in place, let's focus on why should you study in Canada. Number 1 is world-renowned qualifications. Canada is recognized worldwide for our outstanding quality of education institutes. Our educators are highly trained and bring diverse perspectives to the classroom. At the university level, 2 out of every 5 academics hold at least one international degree. And we have 11 of the top 250 universities worldwide. Number 2 is affordable education. Canada is known for having some of the lowest university tuition fee among English-speaking countries. Whatever your budget may be, you'll find something just right for you in our diverse range of education options. Number 3 is safe and multicultural communities. We are proud to say that the warm and friendly stereotype about Canadians is true. When you come to Canada, you will find a welcoming country with a unique Canadian culture that embraces diversity. Last but not the least is a path to a promising future. Canadian colleges and university students graduate with a strong earning potential. To protect Canadians from the outbreak of COVID-19, the Government of Canada implemented travel restrictions that limit travel to Canada. Until further notice, most foreign nationals cannot travel to Canada, even if they have a valid visitor visa or an electronic travel authorization. These restrictions stop non-essential or non-discretionary travel to Canada. In this slide, let's look at the travel restriction exemptions for students in more detail. Not all students will be able to travel to Canada under the current travel restrictions. To be exempt, you must be in possession of either a study permit visa issued on or before March 18, 2020, or a port of entry letter of introduction which indicates your study permit was approved on or before March 18, 2020. Equally as important, you must also be able to demonstrate that it is essential for you to travel to Canada. For example, you have in-person classes, or you are already in the middle of a program of study and need to return to it. You can demonstrate this by providing a recently dated letter from your designated learning institute that explains why you physically need to be in Canada for the fall semester. These documents must be provided to the airline at the time of boarding and to CBSA once you reach a port of entry in Canada. Failure to do this may result in denied boarding of your flight or being forced to return from Canada at your own expense. We will not provide any travel authorization letter for students. All you need to travel is your visa or port of entry introduction letter and evidence of your essential need to travel. It is very important to note that you should not travel to Canada until at most 3 weeks before the start date of your class, for which your physical presence in Canada is required. For those who have already been issued visas for a previous semester but were not able to travel to Canada to attend, please send us a copy of your new letter of acceptance and advise us of your new start date. You can send these documents to us via a web form. Now let's look at what processing changes have been introduced as a result of the pandemic. Visa application centers, also known as VACs, are currently closed. This means we are unable to accept any paper application submissions. As such, only online submissions are being accepted. On the IRCC website, we normally publish processing times for each of our missions for all our lines of business. Please note that these processing times are no longer accurate, as there are processing delays due to reduced staff at the mission. That being said, IRCC is working very hard to process all visa applications in time for the fall 2020 semester. To do this, we need your help by submitting your application as early as possible and submitting all of the required documents as soon as possible. We are aware of many service disruptions that are causing delays in submitting a complete application. For example, we know that VACs remain closed. This means that there is no mechanism to submit biometrics at this time. We know that panel physicians are operating at limited capacity. This means that it may take longer for you to obtain an appointment to complete your immigration medical exam. We also know that some businesses and schools remain closed or are operating at limited capacity. This means that it may take longer for you to obtain the supporting documents you need for your application. All of that being said, we will not refuse any applications for non-compliance or failure to submit the requested documents at this time. This means you do not have to worry about the deadline specified in the request letters sent to you. However, note that we will not be able to complete the processing of your application until all required and requested documents have been received. So it is in your favor to submit these documents to us as soon as possible. The exception to this are the following 3 documents you must provide upfront or your application may be refused. First is the application forms. You do not have an application unless you complete the IRCC forms required. Second is the fee. This includes both the study permit processing fee and the biometrics fee. Third is the letter of acceptance, also known as LOA, from a designated learning institute in Canada. This is mandatory for you to submit with your application. Please note that we cannot physically issue any visas until the VACs reopen because we have no mechanism for two-way transmission of passports between you, the client, and us, the visa office. We are, however, attempting to return passports for any existing paper files at the mission, as we realize this is an important identity document for you. Any documents mailed directly to the mission will be returned to the sender. so please do not attempt to send your passports directly to us. Please wait for the WACs to reopen. So I've previously indicated that only those with visas issued on or before March 18 may travel to Canada under the current travel restrictions. The recently introduced measures address applications which have not yet received approvals as of March 18th. Here are those measures. If your program of study will qualify you for a postgraduate work permit, also known as PGWP, and part of your course, that is fall 2020 semester, has been moved to an online format because of the pandemic, the time spent on the online portion while outside of Canada will still count towards time on your PGWP. However, the online portion must be 50% or less of your entire program of study. This means you will still need to complete at minimum half of your program in Canada for all that time you count towards your PGWP. Number two is that online study permit applications will be prioritized. A two-stage approval process will provide some breathing room for students who are not yet able to provide biometrics or medicals. The first stage is the approval in principle, also known as AIP. This is essentially the eligibility assessment of your application. If you receive an AIP approval, your online course time will count towards time for your PGWP. This means you do not have to wait for a visa to be issued. Stage 2 refers to admissibility and final decisions on an application. In cases of approval, this results in visa issuance. Please also note that an AIP approval is not a guarantee of a visa. Stage 2 includes admissibility decisions. For example, you may be refused a visa despite having an AIP because you failed your medical exam. This chart explains the process from start to entering Canada. Prior to applying for your study permit, you should carefully research designated learning institutions, decide if you're traveling alone, prepare a budget and proof of funds, gather important documents. If you want assistance regarding the study permit process, ensure that you seek the help of a certified immigration representative. After you receive your letter of acceptance, you can apply for a study permit. This is where the process has changed a bit, where your decision-making process is broken up into two stages. As well, even after being issued a visa, you may still not be able to enter Canada if you are not exempt from the travel restrictions. As you can see, the assessment of your application will be broken up into two stages. Based on the current travel restrictions, even if you are issued a visa, you still will not be able to enter Canada unless you fall under an exemption. So the AIP applies to applications which have not yet received a final decision as of March 18th. It refers to the eligibility assessment of your application. Essentially, it means that even though you are still missing medicals or biometrics, you may still be able to receive an AIP on your application. The criteria for this assessment has not changed. Neither the requirements nor how an officer makes that assessment. Here are the criteria. Number one is that you're a genuine student. This means you have demonstrated the academic and language capability through the submission of your previous academic transcripts and IELTS or TOEFL scores that you're able and qualified to complete a program of study in Canada. Number two is that you've been accepted by a designated learning institute in Canada. This means you have submitted a valid letter of acceptance from a DLI in Canada. Number three is that you have sufficient funds to pay for your studies, living expenses, and transportation without working. This means you have submitted financial evidence of liquid funds to pay for these three things for the first year of school and demonstrated by explanation and proof how you intend to pay for these three things, that is tuition, transportation, living expenses, for all of the remaining years of studies. Fourth is that you will leave Canada by the end of your authorized stay. This means you have demonstrated through evidence and explanation of what your ties are to your home country, which will motivate you to leave Canada once your visa expires. Once you receive an AIP in your application, a letter will be sent to you electronically to relay this information to you. You may also receive requests for biometrics and medicals if you have not yet submitted them. This slide provides a list of basic documents required to receive an AIP for the SDS and non-SDS stream. Let's look at the SDS list of mandatory requirements for an AIP. Number one is that you need a valid letter of acceptance from a designated learning institute in Canada. Number two is you need to provide IELTS test result demonstrating 6 in each band. Only in-person test results will be accepted. We are not accepting online test results. Number three is that you need to show a receipt or documentation from the DLI that tuition has been paid for the first year. If you also have scholarships or grants, you should also provide documentation to demonstrate this as a part of this requirement. Number four is that you have to provide a receipt for a GIC of 10,000 Canadian dollars. Number five is to submit most recent secondary or post-secondary school transcripts. And last but not the least is that for Quebec-bound students, you need a CAQ. Now for the non-SDS streams, these are the mandatory documents for an AIP. First is to submit a valid LOA from a DLI in Canada. Number two is to provide IELTS, TOEFL, or PTE test results. No online English test results will be accepted. Number three is to show documentation that demonstrates you have in liquid funds and enough money to pay for tuition, living expenses, and transportation for the first year of school, plus an explanation and evidence of how you intend to pay for all of the remaining subsequent years of school without relying on working in Canada. Fourth is to submit your most recent secondary or post-secondary school transcripts. And last but not the least, you need a CAQ for Quebec-bound students. Additionally, we would recommend you to submit a letter explaining why you choose your program of study. Admissibility assessments are made after AIP and before visa issuance. They include assessments such as medical, criminality, and biometrics, among other things. This means that you must, number one, provide biometrics. Number two, complete your immigration medical exam. Number three, answer all questions truthfully and completely. This includes declaring all previous visa refusals for all countries, providing all of your background history for the last 10 years, and being truthful about any previous arrests and criminal history. And lastly, you must always submit only authentic documents. It is important to note that the required documents to submit under SDS has not changed. We realize that due to service disruptions, you may not be able to submit all of the required documents to qualify under the stream. Examples of this may be upfront medicals, IELTS results, GICs, etc. If you're unable to submit a required document, for example, upfront medicals, your application will be moved to the non-SDS stream. Many of you will have questions about working in Canada and how changes may affect your opportunity to be employed. This is why the postgraduate work permit or the PGWP is important for many students. Work experience provides a better opportunity to gain the language skills and work experience required to apply for permanent resident status in Canada. As well, Canada has some of the highest salary for workers. Additionally, if you decide to return to your home or work in another country, people who gain Canadian work experience are often able to demonstrate that they have the skills, knowledge, and critical thinking required to do a job. It is worth noting that to obtain a 3-year postgraduate work permit, the applicant must have completed a minimum of 2 years of post-secondary studies in an eligible program. You can complete more than one program and combine their length to determine your PGWP length, but in that situation, each program has to be PGWP eligible, including being at least 8 months in length. This section applies to students already in Canada. Essentially, if a student switched to part-time studies or had to take a break in studies, for example, the spring-summer semester may have been cancelled due to the pandemic, they may still continue to work on and off campus provided that they were previously a full-time student and already authorized to work on or off campus pre-pandemic. For off-campus work, the maximum limit is 20 hours per week during the academic session, and full-time during the regular academic breaks. For students who are in essential services, this could include jobs in the health sector, for example. They can work more than 20 hours per week up until August 31st. To qualify for this, they need a valid study permit, must currently be in an academic session, authorized to work on or off campus, and must be working in an essential job. For those who are not yet in Canada, a common question we are asked is if you can go to Canada and work those maximum 20 hours per week while taking online classes for the fall semester. The short answer to this is no. I would like to remind you of what we discussed in the earlier slides regarding what students need to demonstrate in order to travel to Canada. Unless your physical presence is required for your studies in the fall semester, it is not essential for you to travel to Canada at this time. Additionally, only students with visas issued on or before March 18th can travel to Canada under the current travel restrictions. So we have heard your concerns about having to pause mid-studies for one-year programs so you do not exceed the maximum allowable time on online studies outside of Canada in order for the entire program to count towards your PGWP. We are pleased to introduce new measures to address this. Here are the latest changes. If you're unable to travel to Canada at this time due to travel restrictions, your eligible online studies will count towards your PGWP if you are you already have a study permit, you already have been approved for a study permit, or you will apply for a study permit before beginning your program of studies in January 2021. If you fall in any of the situations listed above, you can complete up to 100% of your program online while outside of Canada if your program is between 8 and 12 months in length and you started your program of study between May and September 2020. This essentially means that taking an entire one-year program online outside of Canada may qualify the entire program for a PGWP. You can complete up to 50% of your program online up until April 30, 2021, while outside Canada if you also eventually complete at least 50% of your program in Canada. Additionally, you can complete up to 50% of your program online up until April 30, 2021, while outside Canada if, number one, you graduate from two different programs within 2 years of each other, and each program is at least 8 months in length, and at least one of the programs started between May and September 2020, and at least 50% of the combined programs is completed in Canada. This means that you could potentially complete a one-year program outside of Canada and then take another one-year program in Canada, and both programs will give you the maximum allowable time towards your PGWP. If you decide to study and work in Canada, you may then decide to make Canada your permanent home. To begin this process of applying for permanent residence in Canada, you must submit your profile in the Express Entry online system. This will show you how many comprehensive ranking system points you have based on your education, work experience, language ability, and other factors. On a regular basis, IRCC invites the candidates with most points in the Express Entry pool to apply for permanent residence through one of the federal economic immigration programs. If you're invited to apply for permanent residence, your invitation will tell you which program you need to apply through and will have 60 days to submit your application. There are other options to apply to immigrate permanently as a worker outside of the Express Entry system. Some examples include the Provincial Nominee Program and the Atlantic Immigration Pilot. Now let's look at the conditions by which you must abide before air travel to Canada. The airline will require the following documents from you. First is your passport. Second is a valid study permit visa or a port of entry letter of introduction issued on or before March 18th. And third are your documents to demonstrate that your travel to Canada is essential. Failure to provide any of these documents may result in your being denied boarding. Additionally, you will be required to pass a health check performed by airline officials just before your flight. If you're showing any COVID-19 symptoms, you may also be denied boarding. If you're approved for boarding, note that you must wear a non-medical mask or face covering upon arrival in Canada. All travelers must undergo a health check upon arrival in Canada. It is also mandatory that all passengers arriving in Canada must self-quarantine for 14 days. This means that all travelers must have a plan to self-quarantine for 14 days, confirm and provide evidence that they have a suitable place to quarantine. This means, this means providing an address and explaining how they intend to self-quarantine if other people live at the same location. And also explain how you intend to respect that quarantine plan. For example, explain how you intend to receive essential items such as food. Please do not travel to Canada unless you have a viable quarantine plan. Failure to comply has consequences, which include a fine of up to 750,000 Canadian dollars, 6 months in prison, or being deemed inadmissible, removed from Canada, and banned from entering Canada for 1 year. In this section, we want to inform you of various fraud activities and misinformation related to immigration applications. You may scan the QR code on the screen as I speak. It is most important to protect yourself. We always say that if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. You should never share your personal information with unauthorized agents. You should also never believe any claims guaranteeing you a visa. Each application is assessed on its own merit by a migration officer. Second are fraudulent websites and scams. Websites and social media accounts may claim to be from the Government of Canada. Applicants are tricked into transferring money for services that will never be provided to them. Our official website, once again, is www.canada.ca/immigration. Then we have email scams. IRCC will never send you an email from a personal address like Hotmail or Gmail. IRCC addresses always end in .gc, .ca, or canada.ca. We also have telephone scams. Please remember that IRCC will never ask you for any sort of payment by telephone. Regarding unauthorized agents, examples of unauthorized agents includes examples of authorized agents include members of law societies in Canada, members of the Chambers des Notaires in Quebec, and members of ICCRC, that is Immigration Consultants of Canada Regulatory Council, is a regulatory body for immigration consultants in Canada. You do not have to use an agent to submit an application. But if you choose to use one, make sure they are legally authorized to represent you. Please visit our website for more information. With respect to agents, we understand that many schools use education agents to recruit students. This is perfectly acceptable as long as their activities are restricted to recruitment. This means that they should not be providing any immigration services or advice unless they are also an authorized agent. For more information, here are the many ways to connect with us and find more information. We have the IRCC website on the screen, the High Commission website, and our social media handles on Facebook and Twitter by the name of Canada in India. We also have a YouTube channel in which you can find various tips with regard to fraud and other important information. So this brings us to the end of the presentation. I would now request Anandita to please address your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Shakir. Hope the information that Shakir shared was helpful, and we will also continue with our webinar now by addressing the questions that we have received. As mentioned right at the beginning of the webinar, at the start of the webinar, that the questions we will be addressing will be generic so that it benefits all the participants that we have today. I will start with the questions category wise and we will proceed accordingly. So the first questions that I will take up are based on essential travel. The first question is, how do I demonstrate that my travel to Canada is essential if I have never lived in Canada? The answer to this is you need to consult your designated learning institute to determine if your entry into Canada is essential. If your entry into Canada is essential, then the institute should provide you with a letter clearly outlining why you must be in Canada. Neither IRCC nor the High Commission provides travel authorization letters for students. I am a student in Canada who traveled to India in March. This is the next question. I was not able to get a return flight after the lockdown took place. Can I travel to Canada now? The answer to this is yes. An essential reason to travel to Canada is if you were previously living in Canada and you are returning home, then you are allowed to travel to Canada right now. The next question, which is a very common question right now, given the current situation, is my Wi Fi is not reliable from outside of Canada. So, can I enter Canada to study? So, the very short answer to this is that every student situation is unique. It is important for you to consult with your DLI regarding options for studying online. If your bandwidth is not suitable, you should look at different options such as upgrading your Wi Fi. Unless and until your DLI advises you that in person attendance is essential, you cannot enter at this time. The next question is, what if my DLI does not provide online courses and requires me to be in Canada, but I received my visa approval only after March 18th, 2020? The answer to this is that you will not be able to travel to Canada under such circumstances given the current travel restrictions, even if your DLI requires you to be in Canada. And in this case, what you should do is consider deferring your studies. The next question is, can I still go to Canada and work 20 hours a week off campus if my classes are online? The very short answer to this is no. If your classes are online, you would not have an essential reason to travel to Canada, and hence you will not be able to work off campus. The next question is, I was not allowed to board the aircraft leaving for Canada even though I have a valid study permit issued before March 19th. What should I do? So, the final determination to allow a traveler to board an aircraft is made by the airline and often in consultation with the Canada Border Services Agency. So, it is your responsibility, the traveler, to have documentation that clearly shows that your travel to Canada is essential. Now, I will move on to a few questions related to the current two-stage assessment process which is in place. And we seem to have received a lot of questions around those. So I will try and address all of those so that it is beneficial for everyone who is listening to us today. So, what documents must I submit before September 15th, 2020 to be eligible for the two-stage processing? So there are three mandatory documents that you must submit. Your completed IRCC application form, proof that your fees has been paid for your application as well as for your biometrics. Even though right now you are not in a situation to submit biometrics, you still need to pay the biometric fee right now. And another very important and mandatory document is the letter of acceptance from your designated learning institute in Canada. And in addition to all these mandatory documents, you should also submit as many of the other supporting documents which are possible for you at the current time so that you can avoid delays in your processing. The next question is the two-stage processing available for winter 2021 start dates? The answer to this is no. The two-stage processing is currently only for programs that are starting or have started in the spring, summer, or fall of 2020. The next question is, how do I obtain an approval in principle or AIP? Is this the first stage of approval? So approval in principle happens in the stage one or the first stage of the review of your application. It is granted when a visa officer is satisfied that you as a student are eligible to study in Canada and you will abide by the terms and conditions of your study permit and that you will leave Canada after your authorized stay in Canada. The next question is, What documents must I submit to receive AIP? So I will first address this with regards to SDS or Student Direct Stream. So the documents in this situation would be a letter of acceptance from your DLI, your IELTS test score showing that you have scored a band of 6 in each of the modules, your entire tuition fee paid for the first year of studies, a guaranteed investment certificate of 10,000 Canadian dollars, your most recent secondary or post-secondary school transcripts. And if you are a Quebec-bound student, then of course you need to show your CAQ. What about documents that you need to submit if you are applying under non-SDS? And this is for in order to receive an AIP. The documents in this case would be a letter of acceptance from a DLI. Of course, this is always mandatory. Your English test results. And as Shikhir mentioned in his presentation, the only tests that we are still accepting are IELTS, TOEFL, and PTE. And no online versions of any of these tests are going to be accepted. So no IELTS indicator, no Duolingo, I'm sorry, no IELTS indicator, no Duolingo, nothing of that sort will be accepted. It is still the traditional IELTS, TOEFL, and PTE tests. You also have to show evidence of financial ability to pay for your tuition, your transportation, and your living expenses in Canada, and your most recent secondary and post-secondary school transcripts, and in case if you are going for a Quebec institute, then your CAQ. The next question is, what do I do if I cannot submit a document within the requested time frame? So currently, we are aware that there are restrictions with regards to a lot of VACs not being open in India, a lot of the panel physicians not operating full time. So IRCC will not refuse any application for non-compliance or failure to submit the requested documents at this time. But please remember to submit the requested documents as soon as you are able to, even if the deadline for the submission has elapsed. However, you have to know that without receiving your full application documentation, including the supporting documents, IRCC will not be able to complete the processing of your application. The next question is, how will I know that I have been granted an AIP? The answer to this is that a letter confirming your stage 1 approval will be sent to your online account. The letter may request you to complete the rest of your requirements, like your biometrics and your medicals. If you have not already done so, in order to be issued a study permit, you need to share those with us, like I said, as early as possible. The next question is, if I am granted an AIP, can I assume that once I complete my biometrics and medicals, I will get a student visa? So the answer to this is actually no. AIP is not the same as being granted a visa, or it is not the guarantee of a final visa issuance. The officer will need to establish that you meet admissibility requirements. And admissibility requirements were those shared by Shikhir during his presentation. You have to note that a second stage refusal is uncommon, provided that you are truthful in your application, that you have not provided any fraudulent documents to us, and that you comply with any additional requests immediately. The next question is, what requirements need to be completed to receive approval for second stage admissibility decision? So, in order to conduct this assessment, you must provide biometrics, you must complete your immigration medical exam, you must answer all questions asked in your application form truthfully and completely. This includes declaring all previous visa refusals for all countries, providing all background history for the last 10 years, and being truthful about any previous arrests and criminal history. And in addition to this, a very important thing that you must note is that you must submit only authentic and genuine documents to us. The next question is, what if my school starts prior to receiving my stage 1 or AIP approval? The answer is you can start school online prior to obtaining your AIP. If you receive AIP after you started school, all the time will still count towards your PGWP, provided that you submitted your study permit application before September 15th, 2020. So that is the date you need to remember. The next question, which seems to have come in from a lot of people, is will I receive a refund of my tuition fees if my application is refused when I am studying online in India with a DLI in Canada? So IRCC has no say in this. This is something which you need to check with your DLI. So please consult with them and check with them regarding their refund policy. Now I will move on to a few processing time related questions because we have a lot of those questions. I will try and address the concerns that people have. So the first question is processing for SDS study permit applications faster than non-SDS applications? So there have been many service disruptions due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and we have not been able to maintain our standard processing times. We are working through our inventory of applications right now as we speak. Note that IRCC will not refuse applications for non-compliance or failure to submit the requested documents at this time. However, if you are not able to submit requested documents in a timely manner, we will not be able to complete the processing of your application until all required and requested documents have been received. The next question is, when can I expect a decision on my application? Again, I have to mention here that because of the service disruptions, our processing times are no longer accurate. So IRCC is working very hard towards normal service delivery standards. Applications meriting a refusal are being finalized at this time. So a lot of people who are asking over the Q&A box that why most of the people are receiving refusals and the rest of them are not receiving their responses. It is because of this reason that we are right now finalizing those applications that merit a refusal. So you need to check your online account or email in case you may have received a refusal letter. For the applications to receive a visa approval, these will not be finalized until VACs reopen. So that is the current situation. What happens in case you have to submit your passport after you get your visa? So currently you have to wait for the visa application centers to reopen to submit your passport for a visa issuance. Please do not send your passport to any of our offices because we cannot accept passports at this time. And if you send your passport to any of our offices, it will be returned to you at your own expense without a visa. So please be careful with this. The next set of questions that I would be addressing now are the language tests. So the first question here is, can I submit a language proficiency test result that I completed online? What if my school has accepted that same test result for my admissions? Will that be sufficient in that case for an IRCC application? The answer to this is no. IRCC does not accept results from online language tests, like I mentioned earlier. There are no changes to the language proficiency assessment score that we require. The recommended tests are still IELTS and TCF or TEF for French. Test scores from Duolingo or any other online language test will not be accepted for any immigration application purposes, including for study permits. The next question is, what if my IELTS score is expired or about to expire? We, IRCC, will accept the IELTS results as long as they were valid on the day you submitted your application. So say, for example, you submitted your application in March, at which time your IELTS scores were valid, and by now they might have expired. You do not need to worry because we will consider the validity of the test on the date when you submitted your application, which in this case, in the case of this example, would have been March. The next question is, does IRCC accept PTE language scores as proof of language ability? The answer to this is that we recommend that you submit language scores indicated on the IRCC website. So you can go to our website and check which tests we are validating. However, if you have completed a PTE language test, you may submit your scores to us using the PTE portal. Please remember that when you are submitting your scores to us in that way, you do not include your username and password in your application. The next question is regarding deferrals because we have received a lot of questions regarding deferrals. So I am trying to answer the most common questions that we have received. So the first question is, my application is still pending. What happens if I defer my studies to a later semester? So the answer to this is that if you choose to defer your studies, that is completely your decision, of course, but you have to ensure that you submit a new letter of acceptance to us using the web form as soon as possible so that we can update your file. The next question is, I have received approval of my study permit, but I have deferred my studies. So how do I extend my visa? In this situation, you will need to apply for a new study permit with updated information. If you were in Canada, you could have applied for an extension of a study permit, but because extensions are only granted to students who are already in Canada, in your situation, you will have to apply for a fresh new study permit with all the latest information. And the next question is, can I defer my studies after I receive my AIP? So the answer to this is yes. However, you must submit a new LOA from your DLI as soon as possible. If you change your course of study or decide to study at a different DLI, the officer may reassess your stage 1 or your AIP decision. The next question is a very hot topic right now because of also the recent announcement which has been made. The next series of questions are addressing the PGWP or the post-graduation work permit. So the first question is, what percentage of my studies can be online to be eligible to obtain a PGWP? The answer to this is that the online portion must be 50% or more of your entire program of study. This means you will still need to complete at minimum half of your program in Canada for all of that time to count towards your PGWP. The total program of study is calculated based on the number of courses completed in Canada. The next question is, I have already completed 50% of my program online prior to the fall semester. Can I still obtain a PGWP? So the answer to this is, if you started your program in the spring or summer 2020 and have already completed 50% of your program online, you need to make one of two choices. You need to either continue to complete the remaining 50% online, and if you choose this option, it means that none of your academic time will count towards the PGWP. Or you could choose to defer your program of studies so that you can do the remaining 50% in person in Canada. And this option will qualify your entire program of study towards a PGWP. The next question is, do we have to wait for AIP for courses to count towards PGWP? As already addressed, the answer to this is no. As long as you have submitted your study permit application before September 15th, 2020, your entire fall semester will count towards a PGWP, even if you receive your AIP at a later date. Note that you will still have to meet other eligibility criteria for a PGWP, which would have been applicable in a non-COVID scenario. And the final question in this category that I'll be addressing is, can I switch from full-time to part-time studies? And will this affect the duration of my PGWP? So for the fall 2020 semester, you must be enrolled for a full-time study program for that to count towards a PGWP. However, for winter, spring, and summer semesters, the duration of your PGWP will not be affected if you became a part-time student because your DLI cancelled or delayed classes due to public health measures. And I think with that, I have answered most of the generic questions which I had come across through the Q&A chat box. However, there are still a few specific questions which have not been asked by a lot of people, but which seem to be very relevant at this point in time. So I would now invite Ms. Jackie McLean, who is the manager of our Client Service and Exceptional Case Unit, to address those questions, and Shikhir Gupta will ask her those questions. So over to the both of you.
Hi, Jackie. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Jackie. So, Jackie, one of the questions which has been coming in different versions is that why July SDS files are not getting any results as of now.
Um, that actually isn't an accurate statement. The office in the mission is working very hard to provide approval in principle for SDS and non-SDS applications. as well as we not only have our office at the mission in Delhi, but we've asked our sister offices in Canada to also assist with student processing to make it a priority. So we are working through cases as quickly as possible to give students assurance by the time the fall session starts that they will receive approval in principle.
Thanks, Jackie, for the clarification. The next question is that I have applied for a study permit for the January 2021 intake. Please clarify how IRCC would consider my file, whether under the two-stage approval process or a full visa approval. Will IRCC continue to two-stage processing for the winter 2021 intake or not?
So if you're applying for the winter 2021 intake, then the two-stage approval is primarily for people that are applying for the fall session and apply before September 15th, 2020. So it's those two things. Therefore, if you're looking for admission into the January date, the January enrollment, we would suggest that you wait for those folks that require admission and approval in principle right away and need to attend, and submit your application after that September 15th date.
All right, Jackie, the next question is that if we study online, then what will be mentioned on our degree? Whether it will be mentioned that we did distance education or whether it will be mentioned that we did a regular education.
That's a good question. Unfortunately, it's not really up to immigration, because I would imagine every institution will indicate that in a different way. So I would strongly suggest that you contact your designated learning institution to find out that answer.
The next question, Jackie, is that can I work in India without any restriction while attending an online class in the fall semester? And the second part of the question says that will it in any way affect my PGWP or a future PR application if I apply in future and show my work experience for the while I worked in India?
Actually, I find that a very interesting question. I've seen that a few times from students. And of course, you can work in India. There's no restriction. It's very different than the restrictions put in place if you are in Canada, meaning that you can only work the 20 hours. However, if you're able to study full time and work, that's completely up to you. As far as how it will affect your process going forward, that's really an individual question. So I guess it would mean what type of employment it is. Would it be benefit you for your permanent resident application in the future? That would depend on many different factors. But I think the key point to that is you can decide whether or not you want to work in India while you study. We just hope that you really concentrate on your studies, though.
Thanks, Jackie. So the next question is one that we get pretty often, is that what are the causes for refusal in the second stage?
So we really want to be clear, because I know that students are feeling very anxious about this, and they're very worried that even though they receive approval in principle, that their application will be denied at the second stage, and they might lose the potential is to lose a lot of money. And ultimately, we understand that a lot of students are after not just the education in Canada, but also the work experience. So the second stage of approval is based on your admissibility. So what I can say about that is that if you don't have a criminal background or security concerns, which we do not necessarily find very often in the student cadre, is that where we do find that some students may be refused at the second stage are if we find documents that are not authentic, if we found out that you misrepresented yourself on your application. In other words, if you had previously been deported or refused a visa from Canada or another country, that you did not declare on your application, that would be reason for refusal at the second stage. The other point that I want to mention is um, some uh, some students are worried about medical, such as what if they have a mild case of diabetes, hypertension, things like that. And for medical cases, primarily where we have seen students fail a medical is not necessarily that they're failing the medical portion, but they're not adhering to the requirements of the panel physician. So say, for example, if you have TB and you don't follow the regiment, then we would refuse it for non-compliance of that medical. Very few students are refused because of medical inadmissibility. So medical inadmissibility would be something that is contagious, such as the Ebola virus, or something that would cause excessive demand on our healthcare system in Canada. So say, for example, somebody has been recently diagnosed with cancer and would have to undergo extensive treatment. So those are the types of things that would deem you medically inadmissible. So really the stage 2 approval is based just on your admissibility. So provided you provide authentic documents, answer truthfully, comply with your medical requests, there's very little reason why you would receive a stage 2 refusal.
Thanks, Jackie. So the next question is that as per the IRCC Twitter handle, it says that it is accepting both IELTS general and academic results for study permits. Is it applicable for India or not?
So the IELTS that Anindita mentioned is the one that is accepted for immigration for study permits. So we don't accept anything that is online. And the reason for that is that we still do find that people try to bolster their English results or French results. And therefore, IRCC is reviewing different ways that students can undergo their language testing. But at this time, online language testing is not accepted.
Thanks, Jackie. So the next question is that how can I convert my visitor visa to a student study visa?
Uh, so I'm assuming that they're talking about a visitor visa that has been issued and the person is outside of Canada. So if
That's right.
you've been outside of Canada, okay. So if you're outside of Canada and you have a visitor visa, it's not a conversion. You actually have to apply for a study permit. Now, you require a visa in order to enter Canada. So it's not necessarily that the visa will be different because the coding is merely for statistical purposes. However, if you go to Canada with only a visitor visa and your study permit has not been approved in the system, then you would not be able to be issued a study permit at the port of entry. So it's very important. Everyone has to apply for a study permit outside of Canada unless they meet specific requirements where they could apply at the port of entry. And those are very few situations. So it's very important that you apply for that, a new application outside of Canada. It's not a conversion.
Thanks, Jackie. The next question is that I once applied and got refused for a study permit and later found out that my consultant missed the work and study information for the last 4 years. How can I convey this information to IRCC in my second attempt?
Well, I think it's very important when when you mentioned that you had assistance from an immigration consultant, please make sure to use an authorized representative. If you use an authorized representative and they do not represent you properly, you have a mechanism in order to report them. Then it will be investigated. So there's assurances by using an authorized representative. If you choose not to use an authorized representative, which we strongly suggest that you do not go that route, is that you don't have any assurances. They can submit the application with whatever information they want. And if it is incorrect, the onus is on you. So it's very important that you do your research. And just to flag, there are a lot of agents out there that are indicating that they are certified. Please check the website to make sure that they actually are a certified authorized representative. So to answer your question, if you used an authorized representative and they didn't accurately provide the information, you can go onto the ICCRC website and indicate that you had provided your authorized representative with that information and they did not represent you properly. It will be investigated and then that can be brought to the attention of IRCC. So I would recommend going that route.
Thanks, Jackie. So the next question is that what will be the fate of applicants who have applied as on a visitor visa along with students who have submitted SDS stream applications?
So I just want to make sure I understand the question.
I'll just
Applied for,
repeat it to you
okay.
if you want. It says that what will be the fate of application of those family members who have submitted application with students for visitors under the SDS stream?
Okay, so regardless if it's SDS or regular student stream, family members will be processed with the principal applicant, the student who is the principal applicant. It's very important to remember that when your family members are processed, that you need to include information regarding how you will be able to financially support your family members while in Canada without working. So that's an important component which sometimes is missed. They assume that because their spouse can get an open work permit, that would be able to fund their studies. And that's not the case. Your primary purpose for traveling to Canada should be to study, and having your family there is important, but you cannot indicate or have provide any we can't provide assurances that your spouse would be able to work in Canada. So when submitting that application, make sure that you indicate how your spouse could accompany you without working. The second part to that is right now, the travel restrictions prevent um, family members who are accompanying temporary residents to enter Canada unless they have an authorization letter. So if your family member is approved with your study permit application, and when the border restrictions are relaxed and that study permit holder can travel to Canada, just make sure that your family members are also able to do that, because at this time you require the authorization letter.
Thanks, Jackie. So the next question is also which we are getting pretty often. Since it's a new document, the question says that can you please show us how an approval in principle letter looks like, maybe a sample, because we have doubts of whether we may get a fake mail or a real approval in principle letter.
Okay. I think you're talking about for the applications that were submitted through the Visa Application Center, because what I would strongly encourage anyone that's applied online, you will receive that letter through your MyCIC account. Therefore, you know that it's authentic as you can log it into your MyCIC account. For those that applied through the Visa Application Center and on paper, you can link your application, and in that you can check to see whether or not that letter has been issued. So that's what I would suggest. The other thing that I'd like to comment on is anyone who has submitted their application through the Visa Application Center, um, if you have provided an email address in that application, those letters will be sent to you by email from the MyC from the immigration account. So if you provided an email of an authorized consultant, it will go to your authorized consultant. Unfortunately, if you've provided the email of an unauthorized consultant, that's a little bit difficult to then prove because there's no assurances of what types of documents they will provide to you.
Thanks, Jackie. So the next question is that I got my visa before 18th March and it expires in March 2021. I deferred my course to January 2021. Will I be able to get my visa reissued in case I am not allowed to travel before my visa expiry?
So similar to another one of the other questions is there's no extension of a visa. So when we're talking about visa extensions, extensions apply for when you enter Canada and you want to extend your study permit or extend your work permit. But there isn't anything to extend a visa. If you are outside of Canada and your visa has expired, you have to apply for a new visa.
All right. The next question, Jackie, is that I've submitted complete application that is with biometrics, the police clearance certificate, medicals, and the letter of acceptance. Will my application decision still come in two parts?
If you applied before September 15th, yes, we are focusing on approval in principle and to go through as many applications as possible in order to give assurances to students prior to their fall start date, which is happening very, very quickly. So the reason why we're doing that is in order to focus on providing that approval in principle. So even if you have a complete application, it's very likely that you will only receive the approval in principle at this time. And then once our visa application centers reopen, we will focus on the stage 2 processing where we can go through and ensure that people have completed their biometrics and their medical.
Thanks, Jackie. So I think this would be our last question for today and a rather interesting one. It says that if I do not attend online classes after getting my AIP, would it affect my second stage approval?
No, it's up to you to decide whether or not you defer your studies, provided when you defer your studies that it is with the same institution, the same course of studies. If you defer your studies, and well, I guess it's then not really called a deferral, but if you choose to study in a different institution or a different course, and perhaps it's longer, then the officer will look at eligibility again to say, does this make sense? Do they have sufficient funds? So I would say if you're just deferring and it's the same program, same institution, and nothing is changing, then go ahead and defer your studies to when you're comfortable in either studying online or going to Canada at that time.
Jackie, that brings us to the end of the questions for today. Would you like to give some closing remarks?
I would. I just want to really reiterate that today's information is valid for today. Many of you will probably have seen that as recently as the day before yesterday, there was changes which would indicate that the postgraduate work permit can now be extended for if you complete your studies online for anyone starting in the spring, summer, or fall of 2020, and it would continue until April 2021. So that's a significant change. Um, I think they're looking for ways to still attract uh, students. Students are a very essential part of our economy and our culture. And so please stay tuned for further updates because today's information is valid for today. So continue to follow us on Facebook and continue to check our website for up-to-date information. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. So this brings us to the end of today's webinar. And just as Jackie said, I would reiterate that please keep following us on our social media handles for all regular updates.